She was invisible. Just another waitress pouring wine for people who never looked at her face. But on Christmas Eve, she saw something that would either save a man's life or end hers. 3 drops. That's all it took. 3 clear drops falling into a glass of whiskey while everyone was celebrating. And the man pouring them? The billionaire's best friend. His brother in everything but blood. In 10 seconds, that man would be dead. And nobody knew except her. What would you do? Would you speak up and risk everything? Or would you look away and stay safe? This is the true story of the woman who whispered when everyone else was silent. And how that whisper changed everything. Stay with me. Because what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about courage, friendship, and betrayal. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Sometimes I wonder about the moments that change our lives forever. They don't always announce themselves with trumpets and fanfare. Sometimes they come quietly, in a whisper, on a cold December night when everyone else is celebrating. This is a story about courage. About seeing something when everyone else is looking away. About one woman who decided that doing the right thing mattered more than keeping her job. And it all happened at a Christmas party. Let me take you back to that night. December 23rd. The city was dressed in lights, and snow was falling gently outside the windows of the Crystal Room, one of those fancy hotels in downtown Chicago where the rich and powerful gather to celebrate the holidays. The kind of place where a single bottle of champagne costs more than most people's monthly rent. Inside, everything sparkled. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The air smelled of pine from the massive Christmas tree in the corner and expensive perfume from the guests. Soft jazz versions of Christmas carols played in the background while waiters in crisp uniforms moved silently between tables, refilling glasses and clearing plates. That's where our story begins. With a young woman named Rachel Torres. Rachel was 26 years old, and she'd been working as a server at these high-end events for almost 2 years. It wasn't her dream job, not by a long shot. She'd started college once, studying nursing, but when her mom got sick and the medical bills started piling up, Rachel had to make a choice. School could wait. Family couldn't. So she dropped out, picked up as many shifts as she could, and became invisible. That's what they wanted from servers at these events. Be there, but don't be seen. Pour the wine, but don't make eye contact. Clear the plates, but don't exist. Rachel had gotten good at being invisible. Tonight's party was for Westfield Industries, one of the biggest real estate development companies in the Midwest. They were celebrating the end of their most profitable year ever. Bonuses were being announced. Champagne was flowing. Everyone was in a good mood. At the head table sat 2 men who seemed to be at the center of everything. The first was Daniel Westfield, 36 years old, tall, with dark hair that was just starting to show gray at the temples. He'd built Westfield Industries from almost nothing after his father's company went bankrupt 15 years ago. Now he owned half the commercial real estate in 3 states. People said he was brilliant, ruthless when he needed to be, but fair. He had the kind of presence that made everyone in the room aware of where he was standing. Next to him sat his best friend, Cameron Blake. Cameron and Daniel had grown up together. They'd been roommates in college, started the company together in a tiny office with secondhand furniture. Cameron was the CFO now, the numbers guy. Where Daniel was intense and serious, Cameron was all smiles and charm. He had that easy way about him that made people trust him instantly. Everyone loved Cameron. Rachel had served their table 3 times already that evening. Daniel barely looked up when she poured his water. Cameron had winked at her once and said, "Thanks, sweetheart," in that friendly way that some people have. She'd smiled politely and moved on, invisible again. But then came the moment that changed everything. It was almost 11 o'clock. The party was winding down, but the head table was still going strong. Daniel had just stood up, saying something about needing to take a phone call from their investors in New York. He walked toward the balcony, phone pressed to his ear, leaving Cameron alone at the table. Rachel was standing at the service station about 15 feet away, polishing wine glasses. Just another invisible member of the staff. But she had a clear view of the table, reflected in the huge mirror on the wall behind the Christmas tree. And that's when she saw it. The moment Daniel disappeared onto the balcony, Cameron's smile dropped. It fell off his face so fast it was like watching a mask crack and shatter. What replaced it was something cold. Something angry. Something that made Rachel's hands freeze on the glass she was holding. Cameron looked around quickly, checking to see if anyone was watching. His eyes never landed on Rachel. To him, she wasn't even there. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small bottle. It looked like eye drops, the kind you'd buy at any pharmacy. But the way he held it, hidden in his palm, careful and deliberate, made Rachel's stomach turn. She watched, unable to look away, as Cameron unscrewed the tiny cap. He glanced toward the balcony where Daniel was still on the phone, his back turned. Then Cameron leaned forward and tilted the bottle over Daniel's drink, a glass of whiskey that had been sitting there, waiting. 3 drops fell into the amber liquid. Clear. Almost invisible. They swirled for just a moment and then disappeared completely, like they'd never been there at all. Cameron capped the bottle, slipped it back into his pocket, and then, like magic, the smile returned to his face. He picked up his own glass, took a casual sip, and checked his expensive watch. He looked completely relaxed, like a man who didn't have a care in the world. Rachel's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone in the room must be able to hear it. Her nursing training, those 2 years before she'd had to quit, came flooding back. She'd studied pharmacology. She'd learned about poisons, about how certain substances could stop a heart, cause a stroke, kill someone, and make it look like natural causes. She looked at the glass. Then at Cameron. Then toward the balcony where Daniel was finishing his call. And she made a choice. She didn't think about losing her job. She didn't think about the fact that nobody would believe a server over a billionaire's best friend. She just thought about what would happen if she said nothing. Sometimes the hardest thing in the world is to speak up when staying silent would be so much easier. But Rachel had spent 2 years being invisible. And in that moment, she decided she was done disappearing. You ever have one of those moments where time seems to slow down? Where you can see everything happening frame by frame, and you absolutely know that what you do next is going to change everything. That's where Rachel was standing, frozen at the service station, watching Daniel Westfield walk back to the table, completely unaware that his best friend had just poisoned his drink. She had maybe 10 seconds to decide. 10 seconds before Daniel would sit down, pick up that glass, and take a sip that would end his life. Her manager, Mr. Peterson, was watching from across the room. He'd already warned her twice this month about being too familiar with the guests. One more complaint and she'd be fired. And she needed this job. Her mom's medications weren't going to pay for themselves. But then she looked at Daniel's face. He looked tired, stressed, human. This wasn't some untouchable billionaire in that moment. This was just a man who was about to die because his best friend had betrayed him. Rachel's feet moved before her brain could catch up. She grabbed a fresh napkin from the service station and walked straight toward the table. Her hands were shaking, but she kept them steady. She could feel Mr. Peterson's eyes burning into her back, but she didn't stop. Daniel had just sat down. His hand was reaching for the glass. "Excuse me, sir," Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel looked up, annoyed at the interruption. Cameron's smile tightened just slightly at the corners. "We didn't order anything else," Cameron said smoothly. "Thanks, though." Rachel ignored him. She leaned down, pretending to wipe a non-existent spill on the table, and she whispered 6 words directly into Daniel's ear. "Don't drink that. It's poisoned." Time stopped. Daniel's hand froze halfway to the glass. His eyes, which had been tired and distracted, suddenly became laser-focused. He turned his head slowly to look at Rachel. She was terrified. Her whole body was shaking. But she held his gaze and gave the tiniest nod toward Cameron. "What did you just say?" Daniel asked quietly. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. Cameron laughed, but it sounded forced. "Daniel, what's going on? Is there a problem with the service?" "She said something about my drink," Daniel replied, still watching Rachel's face. He was reading her, trying to decide if she was crazy or telling the truth. "That's ridiculous," Cameron said, his voice getting louder. "Daniel, she's just a server. She probably wants attention or a bigger tip. Don't let her ruin the celebration." "When I was on the phone," Rachel said, finding her courage, "I saw him put something in your glass. A small bottle. 3 drops. Clear liquid. It dissolved immediately." The table went completely silent. The Christmas music suddenly seemed too loud. The laughter from the other tables felt wrong, out of place. Daniel stared at the glass of whiskey. It looked completely normal, amber and innocent. "This is insane," Cameron said, standing up. His face was red. "Daniel, I've known you for 20 years. We built this company together. And you're going to believe some random waitress who probably read too many mystery novels." Daniel didn't respond to Cameron. He kept his eyes on Rachel. What's your name? He asked. Rachel Torres, sir. Rachel, if you're lying to me, Daniel said slowly, you understand that I could make sure you never work in this city again. I'm not lying, she whispered. I saw him do it. Daniel picked up the glass. Cameron relaxed slightly, thinking Daniel was going to drink it anyway. But instead, Daniel held the glass out toward his best friend. Then drink it, Daniel said. The room seemed to tilt. Cameron stared at the glass like it was a loaded gun. What? You heard me, Daniel said, his voice getting colder. If there's nothing in it, if this woman is lying, then drink my whiskey. Prove her wrong. I'll fire her myself. I'll even give you a bonus for putting up with this nonsense. Cameron laughed nervously. Daniel, this is crazy. I'm not going to. Drink it, Daniel commanded. It wasn't a request anymore. People at the nearby tables had started to notice something was wrong. The music seemed quieter now. Conversations were dying down. Cameron looked at the glass. He looked at Daniel. Then he looked at Rachel, and for just a second, the mask slipped again. She saw pure hatred in his eyes. He knew she'd ruined everything. I don't have to prove anything, Cameron said, his voice shaking. This is insulting. After everything I've done for you, for this company. Security, Daniel called out, not taking his eyes off Cameron. Two men in dark suits who'd been standing by the doors started walking toward the table. Cameron made his decision. He lunged, but not toward Daniel. He grabbed a steak knife from the table setting and swung it toward Rachel. She was the witness. She was the problem. If she was gone, it would be his word against nothing. Rachel screamed. Daniel moved faster than anyone expected. He shoved Rachel aside and took the knife slash across his forearm. Blood immediately soaked through his white shirt sleeve, spreading like spilled wine. The security guards tackled Cameron, slamming him down onto the fancy carpet. The knife skittered away. Women screamed. Men jumped back. The Christmas party had turned into a nightmare. Cameron was pinned down, breathing hard, his face pressed against the floor. He was crying now, not from pain but from rage and fear. You ruined everything, he sobbed. Everything. It was supposed to be mine. Daniel was breathing hard, clutching his bleeding arm. He looked at Rachel, who was standing there in shock, her uniform splattered with his blood. Thank you, he said simply. You saved my life. Rachel couldn't speak. She just nodded. And that's when she realized her invisible days were over. For better or worse, she just stepped into the light. They say when you save someone's life, you become responsible for them. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes, when you save someone, they become responsible for you too. Rachel sat in the back of Daniel's private car, still trying to process what had just happened. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. There was blood on her uniform, Daniel's blood, and every time she looked at it, she felt like she might throw up. Daniel sat across from her, his arm wrapped in clean white bandages that were already showing spots of red. His face was pale, but his eyes were alert, focused. Next to him sat his head of security, a woman named Janet who looked like she could break a person in half without breaking a sweat. Cameron was in a different car, handcuffed, being taken to a private location. Not the police. Not yet. Where are we going? Rachel finally managed to ask. Somewhere safe, Daniel replied. Cameron said something before they took him away. He said, you don't know who you're messing with. That means he wasn't working alone. Rachel's stomach dropped. What? Someone paid him to do this, Daniel explained. His voice was calm, but she could hear the anger underneath. Someone powerful enough that Cameron thought he could get away with murder. And that someone knows you're the witness. Oh God, Rachel whispered. My mom. I need to call my mom. Already done, Janet said, not looking up from her phone. We've got a team picking her up from your apartment right now. She'll meet us at the safe house. You can't just, Rachel started to say. Yes, I can, Daniel interrupted. And I should. Cameron tried to kill you, Rachel. When that fails, when whoever hired him finds out you're still alive and talking, they'll come after you. This isn't a game. This is real. Rachel closed her eyes. 12 hours ago, her biggest worry was whether she'd make enough in tips to cover her mom's prescription refill. Now she was in the back of a billionaire's car, running from people who wanted her dead. Why? She asked quietly. Why would someone want you dead? Daniel was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the Chicago streets sliding by, still decorated with Christmas lights that now seemed too cheerful, too innocent. Tomorrow morning, he finally said, the company is supposed to announce a major deal. We're buying out 3 smaller development firms and merging them into Westfield Industries. It's worth about $5 billion. Rachel's eyes widened. She couldn't even imagine that much money. But there's another company, Daniel continued, Riverside Holdings. They've been trying to buy those same firms for years. If I died tonight, especially right before the announcement, the stock would crash. The deal would fall apart, and Riverside could swoop in and take everything. Who owns Riverside? Rachel asked. A man named Victor Kane, Daniel said, and his voice went cold. He's old money. Been in real estate since before I was born. He's always hated that I built Westfield from nothing. Called me an upstart. New money. He's tried to destroy me a dozen times, but I've always been one step ahead. Until tonight, Janet added grimly. Until tonight, Daniel agreed. Cameron was my CFO. My best friend. He knew every detail of the company, every security protocol, every schedule. He was the perfect inside man. Rachel thought about Cameron's face when the mask had slipped. That cold hatred. But why would Cameron betray you? You guys were best friends since college. Daniel's laugh was bitter. Money. It's always money. Cameron had gambling debts. Bad investments. He was living way beyond his means, and I didn't know. Kane must have offered him enough money to make murder look attractive. The car pulled up to a luxury apartment building. Janet got out first, scanning the street, then nodded. They hurried inside. The safe house was on the top floor. It was beautiful but cold, the kind of place that nobody actually lived in. Rachel's mom was already there, sitting on a white leather couch, looking terrified and confused. Rachel, her mom called out, rushing over. What's happening? These people showed up and said you were in danger. I'm okay, Mom, Rachel said, hugging her tight. I'm okay. I promise. Over the next hour, Daniel explained everything. He showed them the evidence. Security footage from the hotel that clearly showed Cameron putting something in the drink. Phone records that connected Cameron to offshore accounts linked to Victor Kane. Text messages that spelled out the whole conspiracy. We have everything we need to destroy Kane, Daniel said, pacing the room. His arm was freshly bandaged now, stitched up by a private doctor who'd asked no questions. But we have to move fast. If the news breaks before we can control the narrative, Kane wins anyway. The stock still crashes. What do we do? Rachel asked. Daniel stopped pacing and looked at her. Really looked at her. We fight back. Tomorrow morning, there's a board meeting. All the major investors will be there. Kane will be there, too. He's on the board. You want to confront him? Rachel's mom asked, horrified. I want to expose him, Daniel corrected. In front of everyone. With all the evidence. With the witness who saved my life. He turned to Rachel. I need you there, Rachel. I need you to tell them what you saw. Rachel felt her heart start pounding again. Me? I'm just a server. Nobody's going to listen to me. That's where you're wrong, Daniel said gently. You're the one person in this whole mess who did the right thing when it mattered. You're the one person who can't be bought. That makes you more powerful than anyone else in that room. Rachel looked at her mom, who squeezed her hand. Honey, her mom said softly, you saved a man's life tonight. Maybe you can save a lot of people tomorrow. Rachel took a deep breath. She thought about being invisible, about staying silent, about how easy it would have been to just look away. Okay, she said. I'll do it. And somewhere across the city, in his mansion overlooking the lake, Victor Kane was making his own plans. Christmas Eve morning arrived cold and gray. Rachel stood in front of a mirror in the safe house, barely recognizing herself. She wasn't wearing her server uniform anymore. Daniel's assistant had brought clothes, real clothes, a dark blue suit that fit perfectly and made her look professional. Serious. Like someone who belonged in a boardroom. But inside, Rachel still felt like the invisible waitress. The girl who poured wine and cleared plates and wasn't supposed to have a voice. You ready? Daniel asked, appearing in the doorway. He was in a fresh suit, his injured arm hidden beneath the fabric. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. No, Rachel admitted. I'm terrified. Good, Daniel said, surprising her. That means you understand what's at stake. But let me tell you something, Rachel. Last night, when you saw what Cameron did, you had a choice. Keep your head down and stay safe, or speak up and risk everything. You chose courage. That same courage is what we need today. They rode to Westfield Industries headquarters in silence. The building was a glass tower downtown, decorated with red and green lights for the holidays. It looked beautiful against the gray sky, like something out of a Christmas card. Inside, the boardroom was on the top floor. Huge windows overlooked the city. A massive table made of dark wood dominated the center of the room. Around it sat 12 people, all of them rich, all of them powerful, all of them looking at Rachel like she was an insect that had wandered in by mistake. At the head of the table sat Victor Kane. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and a face like carved stone. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Rachel's car. When he saw Daniel walk in, his eyes narrowed, but he smiled. "Daniel," Victor said smoothly. "I heard there was some unpleasant business last night at your Christmas party. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Victor," Daniel replied coldly. "Thanks to Ms. Torres here." Victor's eyes flicked to Rachel for just a second, calculating. "How fortunate. And who is Ms. Torres exactly?" "She's the woman who saved my life," Daniel said. "When my CFO, Cameron Blake, tried to poison me at your instruction." The room exploded. People started shouting, denying, demanding explanations. Victor's smile never wavered. "That's a serious accusation," Victor said calmly. "I hope you have proof." "I do," Daniel said. He nodded to Janet, who started playing a video on the large screen at the end of the room. The security footage was crystal clear. Cameron reaching into his jacket. The small bottle. The 3 drops falling into Daniel's drink. Then the attack with the knife. All of it captured from multiple angles. "That proves Cameron tried to poison you," Victor said, still calm. "Terrible, truly terrible. I'm glad he was caught. But it has nothing to do with me. Doesn't it?" Daniel asked. He pulled out his phone and played an audio recording. Cameron's voice filled the room, shaky and defeated. "This was from the interrogation last night. Victor Kane approached me 6 months ago," Cameron's recorded voice said. "He knew about my debts. He offered me $10 million to kill Daniel and sabotage the merger. He said once Daniel was dead, the stock would crash, and he'd buy controlling interest. I'd get my money and a position at Riverside Holdings." Victor's face finally changed. The smile disappeared. "That recording is fake. Clearly fabricated. You're desperate, Daniel." "Then explain this," Daniel said. Janet put up another document on the screen. Bank transfers. Offshore accounts. Money moving from shell companies linked to Riverside Holdings to accounts in Cameron's name. The board members were staring at Victor now. The calculation in their eyes was obvious. They were business people. They understood betrayal. They understood evidence. "Rachel," Daniel said gently, turning to her. "Tell them what you saw." This was it. The moment. Rachel felt every eye in the room turn to her. She thought about running. About saying she didn't remember. About becoming invisible again. But then she remembered Daniel's blood on her uniform. She remembered Cameron's face when the mask slipped. She remembered her mom's words. "You saved a man's life. Maybe you can save a lot of people tomorrow." Rachel stood up. Her legs felt like water, but she stood. "Last night," she said, her voice quiet but clear, "I was working the Christmas party at the Crystal Room. I was serving Mr. Westfield's table. When he stepped away to take a phone call, I watched Cameron Blake put drops from a small bottle into his drink. I'm studying nursing. I recognized what he was doing. So I warned Mr. Westfield." "And why should we believe you?" Victor asked, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're a server. You're probably being paid to lie." Something inside Rachel snapped. She'd spent 2 years being talked down to, being treated like she didn't matter, being invisible. She was done. "I'm not being paid anything," Rachel said, her voice getting stronger. "I warned Mr. Westfield because it was the right thing to do. Because I couldn't stand by and watch someone die. And honestly, Mr. Kane, the fact that you can't understand that, the fact that you think everyone can be bought, that tells me everything I need to know about you." The room went silent. One of the board members actually started clapping slowly. Victor stood up, his face red with anger. "This is absurd. I'm leaving. My lawyers will be in touch, Daniel. You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." "Sit down, Victor," said a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. 2 FBI agents walked into the room, their badges held up. "Victor Kane," one of them said, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, securities fraud, and corporate espionage." Victor's face went white. He looked at Daniel with pure hatred. "You called the FBI?" "I called them last night," Daniel said. "Right after we got Cameron's confession. They've been building a case against you for months. Cameron's testimony was just the final piece they needed." As the agents handcuffed Victor and led him away, he looked back at Rachel one last time. "You," he hissed. "This is all because of you." "Yeah," Rachel said, standing tall. "It is." And for the first time in her life, she felt proud of being seen. You know what's funny about Christmas? We spend so much time talking about miracles, about magic, about things that seem impossible. But the real miracle isn't the presents under the tree or the snow falling outside. The real miracle is when one person decides to care about another person, even when it costs them something. That's the real story here. 3 months after that Christmas morning, Rachel stood in front of another mirror, but this time she was in her own apartment. A new apartment, bigger than the old one, in a better neighborhood. Her mom was healthy. The medications were paid for. The stress lines around her mother's eyes had started to fade. But more than that, Rachel was back in school. After the board meeting, after Victor Kane was arrested and Cameron agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence, Daniel had made Rachel an offer. Not a job, not charity, something else. You saved my life, he'd told her. But more than that, you reminded me why I started this company in the first place. It wasn't about the money. It was about building something good, something that mattered. I'd lost sight of that. He'd established a scholarship fund, not just for Rachel, but for other people like her. People who'd had to quit school because life got in the way. People who were invisible but shouldn't be. Rachel was finishing her nursing degree. She was at the top of her class. But that's not the end of the story. Today was special. It was March 23rd, exactly 3 months after the night that changed everything. And Daniel had invited Rachel to something important. She arrived at Westfield Industries headquarters, just as the sun was setting. The building looked different now. Warmer somehow, even though it was the same glass and steel. Maybe it was just her perspective that had changed. Daniel met her in the lobby. He looked different too. Less stressed. The shadows under his eyes were gone. He smiled when he saw her, a real smile, the kind that reaches your eyes. "Thanks for coming," he said. "You were pretty mysterious about why," Rachel replied. "What's going on?" "Come with me," Daniel said. "I want to show you something." They took the elevator up, but not to the executive floors. They went to the 3rd floor, a space that had been under renovation for weeks. When the doors opened, Rachel gasped. The entire floor had been transformed. Gone were the cold corporate offices. Instead, there was an open, welcoming space with natural light flooding through huge windows. Comfortable furniture. Plants. Art on the walls. And a sign over the entrance. The Rachel Torres Community Center. Rachel couldn't speak. She just stared. "It's for employees," Daniel explained quietly. "But also for the community. Free healthcare screenings. Scholarship information. Financial counseling. All the things people need but can't always afford. I want Westfield Industries to be more than just a company that makes money. I want it to help people." "You named it after me?" Rachel whispered. "You showed me what real courage looks like," Daniel said. "Not the boardroom kind. The everyday kind. The kind where you risk everything because it's the right thing to do. I wanted to honor that." Rachel felt tears running down her face. Happy tears. "Daniel, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just promise me you'll never stop speaking up. Never stop seeing what others miss. The world needs people like you, Rachel." They stood there in silence for a moment, looking out over the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere out there, people were finishing their work days, heading home to their families, living their invisible lives. But Rachel wasn't invisible anymore. And she'd realized something important over the past 3 months. She'd never really been invisible at all. The night of the Christmas party, dozens of people had been in that room. They'd all seen Cameron at the table. But only Rachel had really looked. Only Rachel had paid attention. Only Rachel had cared enough to act. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said. "Anything," Daniel replied. "Do you ever think about Cameron? About how he was your best friend and he betrayed you?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Every day," he finally said. "I've known him since we were kids. I trusted him completely. Finding out he wanted me dead, it broke something in me." "I'm sorry," Rachel said softly. "Don't be," Daniel said. "Because you know what I learned? Real friendship isn't about how long you've known someone. It's about who shows up when it matters. Cameron knew me for 20 years and tried to kill me. You knew me for 20 seconds and saved my life. That taught me everything I needed to know about character." He turned to face her. "Which is why I want to offer you something else. Not a scholarship. Not charity. A job." Rachel's eyes widened. "What kind of job?" "Director of Community Relations," Daniel said. "Running this center. Making sure we're actually helping people, not just pretending to. It's a real position with a real salary. You'd report directly to me. And once you finish your nursing degree, we'll create a new position combining both roles. Daniel, I'm not qualified, Rachel started to say. You're the most qualified person I know, Daniel interrupted. You see people, Rachel. Really see them. That's not something you can teach. Rachel looked around the center. She thought about her mom, about going back to school, about that night when she decided to speak up instead of staying silent. Okay, she said, smiling through her tears. Yes, I'll do it. Daniel grinned and held out his hand. Rachel shook it, and then impulsively she hugged him. After a moment of surprise, he hugged her back. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Thank you, he replied. For reminding me what matters. As they stood there, the last light of the sunset painting everything gold, Rachel thought about that Christmas party 3 months ago. She thought about the whisper that had started everything. She thought about how one moment of courage had changed 2 lives completely. They say the smallest act can change the world. They say one voice can make a difference. They say heroes come in all forms. Rachel Torres had been invisible once. A server, a dropout, someone people looked through instead of at. But she'd never really been invisible at all. She'd always been there, paying attention, caring, seeing what others missed. She just needed the right moment to step into the light. And when that moment came, when she had to choose between staying safe and doing what was right, she didn't hesitate. That's the thing about courage. It's not about being fearless. It's about being terrified and doing it anyway. Rachel had saved Daniel's life with a whisper. And in return, he'd helped her see that she'd always had a voice. She'd always mattered. She'd always been visible to the people who really looked. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is to see them. Really see them. Not as a title or a job or a means to an end, but as a person. As someone who matters. That night, 3 months ago, Rachel had seen Daniel as a person who needed help. And today, he saw her as a person with something important to offer the world. That's how you change a life. Not with grand gestures or huge amounts of money, but with attention, with care, with courage. The Rachel Torres Community Center opened its doors the following week. Hundreds of people came through, people who needed help, people who needed to be seen. And every single one of them was greeted by Rachel, who knew exactly what it felt like to be invisible, who knew exactly how much it meant to be seen. Sometimes all it takes to change the world is one person who decides to pay attention. One person who chooses courage over comfort. One person who whispers when everyone else is silent. Be that person. Speak up. You never know whose life you might save.